I didn't know it would be so hot today. Okay, so yeah, I've been a program associate for 6 months now with the Asia Foundation and always in their digital media and tech programs. And I guess, Sans told you a little bit, but I'm here to talk to you about ICTD in the field, hopefully, and do a deeper dive on the project we've been working on in Indonesia for the past year or so. And the font looks different on here, so maybe that's interesting. But anyway, the Asia Foundation is international development foundation based in San Francisco with offices around Asia, committed to a prospering and flourishing Asia region. We work with partners on the ground, and we're celebrating our 60th anniversary this year, actually. So we have a network of offices in 18 Asian countries. We reopened our 18th office in Myanmar recently after the recent opening up of the government. We have programs in governance and law, and that's the bread and butter of the foundation is work in election monitoring, civic awareness, legal reform, constitutional development, but other programs also in economic development, women's empowerment, environment programs, regional cooperation in trade issues, policy issues, conflict resolution, book donation, quite successful book donation program, and then exchanges with diplomats, students from America and Asia, and other types of issues. Is that just the bells, or just?
No, that's the clock. It's telling you it's 12 o'clock, but it's all good.
So I just want to give a little bit of an overview of why I like working at the Asia Foundation. And it's different because it's not, I come from an international development kind of background, and these are governance issues, so not, the effects of the programs are not, immediately recognizable for donors and funders, so it's kind of unsexy, I say, but kind of growing importance. So the Asian Development Bank put out an outlook recently tying economic and development goals directly to governance, to less corruption, better governance at the subnational and regional level. And then other reasons, we have diverse programs across all those units and themes, and we work with sensitive populations like local religious leaders, which some organizations stay away from, but we kind of dive into. Our kind of funding structure is interesting as well. We're not an endowed foundation, so we rely in large part on grants from U.S. government, foreign governments in Australia and Britain. So we have to align our strategies and programs with their grant programs in some way as well. So digital media and tech. So San used to manage the program back in 2000, and we've kind of re-strategized and opened it up again recently. We've always done digital media work, so John Jameson has always produced videos for our various countries and offices and program areas. And recently has been doing some mapping work and data visualization. The technology programs part is, so we kind of refocused on 4 areas: empowering and making information, legislation accessible to users through mobiles, mostly; connecting and encouraging citizen participation through social networks, so we have the mobile social networks; learning, and that's our open data and mapping efforts to improve transparency and accountability; and then innovating, looking just at the ICT 4D space in general, innovations in the cloud, or on SMS networks, or just general kind of trends in the space as well. And so I think we've seen over time a kind of change in focus from hardware training, computer information centers, and e-governance back when Sun was around in the 2000s, now moving more towards SMS, social media, and mobile-enabled strategies. The project in Indonesia is all the way at the right there, open data, and that's what we've been focusing on a lot in the unit. There's been a big trend recently, like a rebirth of open data and open government. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Open Government Partnership, which was started in 2011 between a network of, I think, 8 countries in Asia, the West and South America as well. At Asia Foundation, we see a big potential for open data in terms of governance work to bring important publicly available data, to bring it to users through mobiles, through open data, through mapping, through all the other strategies I discussed. So I'm here today to talk about the API Pemilu project, which actually exists in broader election and governance work we've been doing in Indonesia for a few years now, with funding from the Australian government. And John Carr and Michelle Chang were very much interested in exploring this open data issue, and the Indonesia case study is a great opportunity because they have their fourth or fifth democratically held elections coming up in April for the legislative assemblies and in July for the presidential elections. So it was good timing. There's been decreasing voter turnout, and some of that is due to the fact that a lot of the there's just a large percentage of young first-time voters. So in addition with the timing of the elections and our work in Indonesia, there was just a large population of young first-time voters who obviously are on mobile phones, using social media. Indonesia is one of the biggest social media users in the world, using population in the world. And together with that, the political candidate data and election information that was available only superficially. So we found that the National Election Commission had a database of sorts available online, but all the information on candidates was aggregated in these PDFs. You had to click through 5 subdomains to finally get to the PDF, and it just wasn't practical at all in terms of letting the burgeoning tech space make use of that data. So all these kind of factors came into play, and then the partner, we had been working with Perludem for a while, the Asia Foundation, in governance programs. They're a CSO focused around election monitoring, civic education and awareness, and just general work around the past elections. They have very good presence in Indonesia, and they kind of became our solid partner throughout the project. The technology itself, so API is Application Programming Interface. I don't know how many tech or ICT students there are in the room, but I'm gonna dive deeper into what that is in the next slide. From the start, we just wanted to provide more awareness and more access to important election information through this API. The result was an election database, which we completed last month, and election applications, around 10 of them or so, that were created this month after a hackathon. And I met with Michelle and John this morning, and they gave me the hackathon t-shirt. Code for Vote took place in Bandung last weekend, no, 2 weekends ago.
Very cool.
Yeah,
White blue.
White blue? I don't know. It's a very, I guess it's a neutral color.
Yeah, I think neutral is the big thing. It's every political party, you have to remain completely neutral.
Right, and that's one of the mainstays of the Asia Foundation. Is we work with politically sensitive issues. Just the Indonesia election alone was 12 political parties, so we have to make sure we involve all parties equally, and our marketing push and app development has to be, neutral. Exactly. So to understand a little better what the API does for the project, I guess we start with database. So the KPU is the National Election Commission, and data existed. Data was released by the KPU in various forms, in PDF, in JPEG, in TIFF, in web format, HTML. It was just all over the place in all different formats. So my role as I was research lead on this project was to analyze where all this data was coming from. 600 plus candidates at the presidential level and 19,000 at the legislative level. So this is a good case for open data when you have that many data points. My role was to identify where these points were and then manage the transcription of the data from a PDF or whatever format into CSV or just Excel kind of database format. All this feeds into the online election database, which my colleague Tomas, who is the technical consultant at TAF at this point, he then linked the database to the API. Stop me if there's any questions as well. So what is an API? The most popular example is probably Google Maps. So Google makes location and other kind of information publicly available on their API, which is open source on their website. And then developers can use the Google Maps API and other APIs of their choice to draw the data they need to make applications like WhatsApp or Yelp or what have you. So we approached it, we approached this idea in the same way. From the database that I just explained back here, we have data like the candidates' names, gender, place of birth, place where they're running, the electoral district they're running in, their work, and their work history and education history. All this feeds into the database, and we worked with Tomas, our technical consultant, and a software company in Indonesia to structure the data. So the API is a layer or a set of coded information that software developers can use to draw from the structured data and then build resulting web and mobile applications that you see on your phone. So it serves as like the interface, the glue, if you will, between the data that's available and the kind of software commands and controls that you can make so that people can like click and get access to the data they need. So it's a little bit, so that explaining that kind of concept to Perludem, who was involved in more traditional like voter outreach and more just traditional civic education, was a challenge in and of itself. Do you guys have any questions on the API? Okay. So
you said you had a hackathon, right?
Right.
So what was the outcome of the hackathon? Did people make good apps, and how many participants?
Yeah. No, the hackathon, I guess, is like the most recent event that took place in like this gigantic project. And 2 weekends ago, I guess, we partnered with some software developer groups on the ground and some social media blogs in Indonesia. And 200 software developers came in Bandung, which is like the Silicon Valley of Indonesia. It lasted, it was like an overnight hackathon. I think a total of 10 apps were created. 3 apps were awarded prizes. And our goal, and what we're doing now on our side of the Asia Foundation is working on featuring the apps. So we have a running partnership with Google on this project. And we're working on featuring the apps on their homepage, creating, using the Google Maps API to map the elections, and then encouraging continued app development, more innovative ideas of how to use data. And I think the ideal goal is that we'd like to see the government get involved as well. So we always talk about the Code for America model in our group because we think it's an interesting way to get municipalities and states involved in like innovative tech. And I think if the KPU and the Indonesian government were to get interested and were to reach out to software developers in country more, that would be like the ideal, end goal of the project. But as it is, we're happy with what the hackathon's done, and we've gotten a lot of media coverage. And by we, I mean Perludem. So Perludem now is in a place to deliver on the kind of data that people want to see, and then get their name out and get the data about the candidates out. So.
So you, before the hackathon, had already created the original database app for the election, right? So what kind of apps were you kind of hoping to see out of the hackathon, and what kind of apps did you see them out of it?
We didn't have any like preconceived ideas of what we'd like to see created. The data at this point is, for the national level candidates, we had more detailed work history, education history, and organizational affiliations. But for other candidates, we had only like name, gender, and electoral district they were running in. So we assumed we would see a lot of like mapping and names, or mapping and gender. So seeing kind of like the gender breakdown in a certain electoral district versus another. What we did see is just like a whole variety of apps. We saw some apps that were more like social network oriented with like news feeds. We saw an app that looked at where a candidate was born versus where they were running, because sometimes in Indonesia, I guess, you're born in one locale but run in another for political or educational or whatever reasons. I think we're working on aggregating all the apps right now, getting them on one website. Then Perludem will be able to push that out and really go for scale and get people to download these. So we really just wanted to see what the software developers would be, what they would want to create, what they would want to see, because they're voters too, right? So it works well in that sense.
What is your motivation for like organizing a hackathon versus just being a really good software developer to build an app that can be used?
I think hackathons are a really popular tool in this space, and sometimes they're glorified a little too much. But this was a really great transition point. One of the challenges, lessons learned on the ground was working with a local partner who doesn't have any kind of previous history with technology or technology applications, mobile development. That's a challenge, right? And so we were always struggling in the project to like do an effective transition and let them take over. The hackathon was a way to like do this project on their terms, on their turf in Bandung. The mayor of Bandung, I believe, came to speak at the hackathon as well. So it was a way to kind of like transition it over to the local software developer community. The prizes definitely attracted like 200 of them, so that was good. And then I think it was great to see the kind of variety and apps created. So, and then the better ones will rise to the top, and ideally. So now it's important that we get scale and that we get the network effect started and see more downloads, because then we'll see which ones the voter population prefers.
And are they all mobile apps?
I believe so, and I believe the majority is Android as well.
Not surprisingly, in the same time. Weird, because this brings back memories of our Cambodia election project. Remember the CIC's Famous and Infamous at the in TAF, and at that point in time, everything was just online, and hackathons and things like that were not even any kind. It wasn't in the conversation. So it's great to see. We talked about how trends have moved, and so you see big data, and hackathons and mobile apps, etc.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think one of the things that we wanted to do and look at was Twitter feeds. Since Indonesians are so active on Twitter, a lot of the politicians have their own Twitter accounts. We wanted to see if there was a way to identify the official Twitter accounts of candidates and then put that in the database as well, like the links to their Twitter accounts. But I never figured out, and talking to Perludem, they also weren't sure how to identify the right accounts. And then some accounts, are very inactive, so we kind of abandoned that idea. But there's definitely political presence on Twitter, that's for sure. Yeah?
What kind of partnership did you say you had with Google? Was it to like feature these apps on the Play Store, or?
Yeah, I think that's what it's looking like now. Originally we were hoping they would co-host the hackathon, because obviously their name would draw in a lot of attention. But they backed out, but we're working on featuring the apps on their homepage, and we're also working with them, I believe, but don't quote me on this, to handle the server demands and the demands on the server and user views, if that were to happen, which I hope it does.
So are all of those apps standalones, or are they going to be integrated into kind of one database or database access to it?
Database access.
The apps that came out of the hackathon, are they going to be standalone? Like I'm going to download the gender distribution map app, and I'm going to download the, location of birth versus location of,
Yeah.
like, are those separate things that I'm going to have to
Right.
download and interact with separately if I want to get that information?
Right. So just the nature of an API means that really only software developers or people coding know how to make sense of the API. So they know like what command, you write in CSS, HTML, or whatever. You write command prompts to say, I want to pull the list of gender by district, and you write a command and then send that command over to your app. I would hope that so most of the apps will be what was created by the software developers, and people will interact with that. There is like raw data available online that you can download, but that's not as engaging. But that's definitely available as well. It's just we were hoping the apps would create an engaging way to see information, and to also like parse the information and have like cross visualization. It's cool. Yeah.
So I mean, what's the penetration, first of all, of the smartphones which would host these apps that were created? The overarching goal of the whole project. Is there like a target demographic that you were thinking about that you think is more important than those who have smartphones?
Yeah, I think, and from the start we were hoping to encourage smartphone use and feature phone use as well. Mobile phone in general is 84% penetration in Indonesia, and then 20% or 25% rather penetration for smartphones. So it's not that high yet, although for the region it's actually pretty good. I don't know if some feature phone applications were created. I can go back to John and Michelle because they were at the hackathon and find out. But target population, I mean, there were 67 million first-time voters, but then of that, a certain percentage on mobile phones and a certain percentage with access to the internet. So that's still our general target. But seeing as we're creating mobile apps mainly, I guess it was those young first-time voters. The project, I think we've reached the halfway point, but there's still a lot of potential, like other potential avenues to explore. The disabled population that can't read or travel to the voting booths. Perhaps there's an app that could be created for them. Different languages, maybe a voice-based application as well. This is part of our ongoing effort to encourage more apps developed. I don't know if that means another hackathon or more work with Prelude, but we're working on developing an ecosystem.
There's also a buzz thing, maybe. Do you think that awareness of these kind of technologies was raised during that event? Was that also part of your mission?
To raise awareness of?
To catalyze the tech industry or maybe?
Yeah, we definitely want to. The project is important in many ways because success on this project means that we can do more of these types of projects in the Asia Foundation across other units with other countries. But it also means in Indonesia we'll have a network of software developers that we can reach out to again. We initially tried to identify civic hackers, so software developers that were interested in social initiatives. And there are scattered groups in Jakarta and Bandung, but at the end of the day, we realized we wanted to reach out to just the broader tech community and get them engaged. So I think that was successful in the end. Yeah.
I was wondering about your impact and evaluation model.
Mm-hmm.
Is it how many apps will be created using the API, or how many people, whether it scales or not with users, or how do you evaluate this project?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've definitely given it some thought and put it on paper at some point, but to be honest, the push with the four of us here in San Francisco and a team of 5 interns in Prelude has been pretty hectic. So we were working mostly on the database and getting the partnership set up for the hackathon. Going forward, yeah, we would love to see a certain number of downloads, and there's metrics for there was metrics, kind of like generally accepted metrics for mobile app development, number of downloads, number of visits to like the GitHub developer page online, number of times the data sets were downloaded. So yeah, we're definitely tracking all of that as well.
Yeah, because I was just wondering, because you said this is for the elections in April and July, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you probably want to collect the baseline data before you can evaluate anything, right?
Yeah. We held the hackathon at the beginning of March. The legislative elections are April 9th, so it was really crucial to get a lot of usable data into the database before March, before the hackathon. A lot of times, civic hackathons will ask developers to do the research themselves, or like the sponsors will get to the hackathon and have like 3 different data sets, but that's not much, right? And they'll tell the developers, okay, well, see what else you can research and like combine in there. But we really wanted to have like a solid amount of data points and like a solid API structure going forward. So that's what we focused on. I think after the April elections, we'll definitely like see what's worked and what hasn't, see which apps have been more popular, and then repackage for the presidential elections.
And you said your donor was the government of Australia, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Australian aid, yes. Let's see. Yeah, I mentioned the point about hackathons. They have to, a lot of organizations, private and public and nonprofit, will just use a hackathon to get people to build for them. But if you just tell people what to build and just give them a very limited structure, it usually doesn't amount to anything very interesting. So we tried to keep it open-ended, and once again, just are working with Perludem to get like the ecosystem right. So social media presence, like the talk on the buzz on social networks, maybe physical meetups to talk about what kind of data is important. So the hackathon is just one point in many others. The media outreach was interesting. We wanted to work with some other websites, some other news websites, and social media organizations, but it turns out after some research they were favoring certain political parties over others. So we ended up not working with them. You have to keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when you're doing your marketing and your branding as well. And yeah, that's it.
Cool.
Sorry, it's a lot to, yeah.
No, it's really good. Yeah. Well, Nick, thanks so much. I mean, just for the benefit of the class, I mean, it's and even for my benefit, I really love hearing about sort of the successor to all these, cool projects. I think what's important as a takeaway too is that as you see those lessons learned and we relate it to what we talked about, it's the same old factors. It's about local capacity, not so much about the technology doesn't work. So keep that in mind as we kind of go into the next phase. Also, keep in touch with Nick. He's sort of, I would love to hear your background over lunch. He's young, up and coming, and got into the ICTD field accidentally or not?
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. Yeah.
And most of us here are really interested to get into the ICTD field more deliberately, but still, So Nick would be an awesome person to get to know. The Asia Foundation has a couple of fellowships. Yeah. Right? Are you
correct.
with the fellowship program?
Yeah, I started off, and so did my manager actually. We started off with a junior associate fellowship at the foundation, which runs twice a year for a period of 3 months, The various departments of the Asia Foundation put in applications for junior associates. So when I applied, the ICTD program is one of them.
That's so cool. I mean, because when I was running the program, we had the first junior associate.
Oh,
yeah, so that became
cool.
a full-time staff. So yeah, please, feel free to ask Nick any questions, maybe after class, and then we'll go from there. Keep in touch. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks.